everywhere there is the word, in some sense, the word of selection, because it's some kind of evolution. What survives in a society? What are the evolutionary selection principles? These are, because he starts with the prisoner's dilemma, these are practically the real selection principles. And I said, cooperation is the real element of evolution. Cooperation, sticking to the rules and just betraying each other is not that what really helps to develop good results. Yeah. Is it really shocking? It is. Okay. So, in evolution, you need also the idea of kin selection, but you also need the idea of multi-level selection. That is when some of you cooperate and some don't. Yeah, a few things you can do in English. It's just no, the point is really just to tell you there is something more to it than just looking at it. Okay. And so what is else important is that in the middle you have to look at the area where you are, where you live. So, before we'll come back to Martin Oeck, the book, but perhaps one remark is that managers quite often have to make decisions, and sometimes they are just guided in their decisions by monetary calculations. And these monetary calculations are, of course, more or less in this realm. And there's one, because I mentioned Ostrom first, and there's one important point. Just in the year, as Elinor Ostrom got her Nobel Prize, there was also an article by Pisano-Enchi published in Harvard Business Review. You know, it's a very famous economic article. It was priced, but had prices, this article. And later on, there's the book, and they had also. And they generalized the idea of Ostrom to the idea of industrial commons. We'll talk about this also in more detail later on sometime, or you will find it in your text. The point is that which problem did they have to solve? The problems they had to solve was the problem of outsourcing. You know, outsourcing is a means to get good economic numbers right in the beginning up, but does it last for long? And the point was, United States, they lost quite a deal. Too much outsourcing, too much loss of knowledge in their own country, too much loss of expertise, and so it went down. That is, they were just guided by the numbers. And there we come back again to this article by Crouch, where we already started last time. That will be the next bit. So, this is one of the books where they really go down and see the limits of outsourcing if you don't use knowledge again. So, all these things are highly practical in some sense, because it depends what kind of means for correcting you use. And the means of correcting are definitely knowledge. So we have to understand the knowledge. And I'll give you, before we go on, one or two small examples where you can also see that people are becoming aware of this situation. Yeah. Okay, there's Michael Sander. Won't tell you, the name won't be known to you or anything. He's a very famous professor at Harvard, and occasionally he has a couple of hundred students who are just listening to him because he's so famous already, and of course in around the world. And here is one little book about what money can't buy, the moral limits of markets. Because we are in the topic of markets right now. Can markets produce all that knowledge that is necessary for the right decision, even for the managers when they have to decide about outsourcing or not? Right? Because they believe that all the knowledge is implicitly there in the market. But the problem is whether our decisions are really just market knowledge. And there's a nice example about Switzerland. All of you know Switzerland. It's a small country in the world, in the mountains. They have a long tradition of democracy. They have learned to talk to each other. Perhaps just to give you a flavor, when they wanted to build the motorway around Zurich, the main town, the engineers said, this is the best way to do it. You have to accept it. And the people said, no, we don't want that. But since they are living in some sort of democracy, I mean, I've been living there close to, and I know not everything is gold what glitters, you know. But they had to talk to each other, and finally they got a new solution. Even the engineers who said this is the best, you can't do it, because the best is always something that depends on the logic, the internal logic of the explanatory situation. Finally they said, no, there's a new solution which is better. We can agree on it, which is also technically better. Sometimes you can use these corrections of all the other people, that extra knowledge, but it's not in the market. That's because of those people learn to talk to each other. You know, to Sandel, one of the nice examples is in Switzerland, that you know what atomic waste is after you have an atomic plant for power station and so on. And you don't know where to put it. In Germany there was problems concerning the waste every year. And we haven't solved the problem nowhere in the world. No. Something they might shoot it to the moon. Anyway, so the parliament in Switzerland decided, yes, there's a small town up there in the mountains somewhere, with crevasses and so on, and perhaps we can put all the waste there, and they will get it. But of course, in a democracy, quite the country, you have to decide. You ask people. Well, the people there said, well, it's important for our whole country because they have a lot of these power stations, and so we'll accept it. Now, what do you think the vote was for or against of the people? It was a small village. It was for. They said, okay, for the whole country it's important. So it was about 51, 52% which were pro, and the others were against. Think of that. Of a country where the people would really say, well, it's important for all of us, therefore we accept it, right? That's seldom, but it happened. So it was not guided by optimizing the local position. So then it said, well, 52, 53, 51, that's a bit low, perhaps we can raise it. I mean, the acceptance. And they said, okay, listen, you get some extra money, everyone of the village, that's quite a deal of money, and would you then agree? And what do you expect to happen? They would have got quite an amount of money. What do you expect to happen? I mean, if he made the same experiment asking people in England, they said, well, 80% would now be would now be accepting it. What do you think happened in Switzerland? It went down. You see, the theory tells you, the economic theory, if there is investment, if there is a way of stressing the positive, you get money for it and so on, then you go on, then it's better. But the theory was false in practice. I mean, the agreement cut down to half, to 25%, from 50, well, nearly half down, right? Why? Because they understood that it's now no more a human decision in the sense of Novak, for instance, but it's a decision, a monetary decision. So they have different ways of understanding. So the monetary or the economic explanation didn't work anymore. So the economic was wrong. They couldn't make predictions due to the economic theory. And a similar example is about a kindergarten or something where was in Israel or some other place that the country doesn't.
Haifa.
Haifa, yeah, but it's Israel. I just wanted to be too exact on the point, because people would walk there and say, "What? Do it?" No. Anyway, people would fetch their children too late in the evening. And so they said, okay, according to economic theory, we fine them. They have to pay for a fine if they get to fetch the children too late. What did happen? Did it work? No. They said, we paid, so we want to fetch them late, yeah. And they said, no, you don't have to pay, they did it. So it didn't make any. So the point is, do our economic theories, and this is right from the beginning, are they explanatory and descriptive? They are explanatory, not literally descriptive, and that's the point of it. And since they're not literally descriptive, we must not use them as action guiding ideas. We have to think of something that's in here in this scheme, the left side and the right side. The left side is the explanatory part, the right side is the operationalizing thing or the action guiding side. And that's the point. And perhaps for the last thing that we do now is take your text and point out a few things concerning this text, which is the last chapter of this new book. Professionals and money system. What should we do when we look at some text like this? There are 5 points which I have to need to discuss first. We always need to think about the meaning. What does it mean? What does it tell us concerning action and so on? And due to time or just gets to the points right away, I would like that we next time we discuss this together, this article. No, it's not so long, it's a final piece of the whole book. Discuss it in the sense of understanding what you've learned so far, by way of understanding the limits and being able to criticize situations, especially as far as the financial crisis 2007 and 8 is concerned, where it was also always the case that we did project our theories and turn them immediately, literally, word by word, into action guiding ideas. And that's where all these things turned up. So, page 129. He has some kinds of hypotheses and points. The attempt, one in the middle, the attempt to make public services behave as though they exist in markets, that is the picture of the market, correct? Both brings to their service an oversimplification of the knowledge involved. So, I will do something. I will show use one of the slides where you have either this one, or you can see this once more. I think we use this one. No. Where is it? Yeah, it's not complete a mistake, but just look at it. We have the argumentation, and argumentation stems from theory, and we have the solutions somewhere. But we also have the expert's knowledge, and we have the expert's solutions. That is, the experts deal with the problems, and there come the solutions. And we have there the actions, and we have the replacement of the experts' actions by some rules and their background knowledge, and the results. Yes, and then finally, what is the lay people use it. But what you forgot, what I might have taken the other slide, here is the abstract analysis, and here's the concrete or action here. So the point was always, here are oversimplifications when we use the situation and go up to the descriptions. Both brings to the service an oversimplification of the knowledge involved in them and undermines the professions that are the carriers of the knowledge. That is, we think we can reduce everything in a way to the rules such that we don't have to learn something extra. So, next page, number 2. The problem is, again, as we pointed out last time, that the market is not complete and doesn't contain all the knowledge we need to make proper decisions. So, although the market in itself is itself a highly elaborate form of knowledge, because all those people interact, heavy reliance on it undermines other forms of knowledge, because then the market selects the knowledge that is not enough, there's not enough correction in there. Because that means that we have in just a situation as in the prisoner's dilemma, where all the individuals are local, egotistic people. Nothing else. Right? If you have a market, you optimize, and everyone is doing what for himself is the best for herself. Right? That's the 1-1 situation. Not win-win, just the 1-1 in the calculation. They lose in the end, they don't win. Right? They are locally isolated elements. And why have stressed this now? There has even been a mathematical investigation over Novak and others, where we found out that in a heap of egotists, a local group of cooperating people can skip the whole system. That happened, by the way, in the United States when it concerned the Vietnam War. There were small groups who suddenly turned the whole thing around. In our own university, it was me who managed to introduce the ideas of computers in the way they were produced by Apple at the time, Macintosh at the time, and we switched the whole university to go away from these old ideas as they were used by Microsoft, and later on Microsoft did use the Apple ideas and create Windows as you know it today. And you know how Apple did develop. We thought of it already. And there were 2 universities in Europe. The one was Lund in southern Sweden, and our own. And we were the first to introduce these ideas and to turn around the whole university to get another way of dealing with knowledge, calculating, using things. Anyway, so the problem is heavy reliance on just this market knowledge undermines other forms of knowledge. Because, of course, at the time you must know that one firm, they produce normal computers like Philips or so. They spent some millions or billions of money to the Austrian ministry and said, yes, you buy our things. Yeah? That is, they would have switched the system in a sense according to their own interests, not thinking of the content, not of what is good, but of what pays for them. And that's a negative selection, right? That's what we need to understand. And therefore it would have undermined the forms of knowledge which we could use. We were then at the time, for instance, teaching Excel, or Excel as we call it, number one, which is now, very well developed. Yes, and before going on to number three, I would like to tell you another thing concerning the decision in an enterprise of development. These ideas concerning the graphic surface and the human man-machine interface was developed in a joint endeavor by Apple and Xerox. You know Xerox, the copy machine. They were very inventive. And by the way, they were the first to do knowledge management in the park. That's the Palo Alto Research Center. John C. Brown. And there's a very good book by him, Social Life of Information. Anyway, they were developing these things together with people from Apple and from around Xerox. And when they were fairly close to an end, they did show the whole thing to the top managers of Rank Xerox. But they were managers who were just deciding on financial terms because they were managers, very good managers, from the car industry in Detroit. And they said, we don't understand it, we won't go on. So all the people from Xerox went to Apple and they finished it. That was the Lisa and the Macintosh, the first generally applications. It was again a decision which would have been wrong if they would have just, the top management made a wrong decision because they didn't think of the knowledge, not what it meant. They didn't understand it. And our point is to try to understand what's going on. So, number three, while the early theories of the free market saw it as nested among actors who would act with moral integrity, the contemporary form of market theory as a rational choice, that's just the way with 1-1, where we start. Rational choice, exact thoughts and rewards dishonest behavior, it connives, it accepts the corruption of knowledge. Concerning moral integrity, the point is, what does the morality of the system mean? It means how far should we go? Ethics is nothing non-empirical. It in some sense gives you a flavor, a feeling, how far should I go in applying my theories or my actions? Where are the limits? And just a question to you. You know, the father of modern economics is Adam Smith, isn't he? Right?
Yes.
You didn't know that? Okay. Who does not know it else? Look it up. Modern economics first, started with Aristotle already, but modern economics theory rests upon Adam Smith in England. Do you know the first book that Adam Smith wrote before he wrote this book on the Wealth of Nations?
Yes.
You know it? No.
Yeah, I remember only Adam Smith and this book from economics.
Yes, but what was the book before economics?
Wealth of Nations.
Wealth of Nations is economics. It's the foundation of modern economics. But before he wrote Wealth of Nations, he wrote another book. It was called Moral Sentiments, because he was originally a man doing ethics at university, working also with Hume and others. And so he made one mistake. Not a really mistake, but he was optimistic, because he thought that as soon as he had the economic principles, people have a normal moral integrity which is built into them, and therefore they know how to apply this economic theory and not to misuse it. And what happened in history is that we learned to misuse it, and that's what the modern financial crisis was. Yeah. So you have to look carefully what are the arguments to apply this, and how this crisis came about. Well, you see the way Crouch discusses it, that is a misuse of knowledge in the market for steering the situation, and of not evaluating things properly. But we go into, and we can solve all these with this scheme that we have there. So while pure market theory requires an economy with large numbers of producers and consumers, actual existing neoliberalism accepts high levels of concentration of monopoly power. Right? You know what that means? It means influencing. In certain cases, it leads to powerful economic elites controlling access to and distorting knowledge to serve their own interests. That if knowledge is misused or changed. And the last point from these 5 hypotheses are to act effectively in the market involves being a self-centered, amoral, calculating machine. And that's why we started with the prisoner's dilemma today. This 1-1 is just the result of being a calculated machine. Your personal interests, and that's why we have another slide which I'll put up in a minute, where we say the sum of the local optimizations is suboptimal for the whole, and what happened in the financial crisis. But the point is really that we have a different picture. We think people should be self-centered, amoral calculating machines. That would be the best. But according to the prisoner's dilemma, that's not the case. But it leads our actions, and that's the problem. When this is just one among a massive features of ourselves, this is not problematic. That is, if just a few people do that, then it's okay. Then it's always selecting that we can change things and it helps to correct. But if all do the same thing, then it's like walking across marching across a bridge over the river. When all march in the same direction, just in the same way, what happens? The bridge